Hello, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Demystifying Money. I'm your host, Misty Lynch, and today my guest is Lyerly Spongberg. She's a divorce coach and the owner of Step Up with Lyerly, who combines professional training and real-life experiences to help guide her clients through one of life's hardest decisions. Lyerly, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
This episode of Demystifying Money with Misty Lynch is proudly sponsored by Soundview Financial Advisors. Visit www.soundviewfinancialadvisors.com to learn more.
So when you were in your 30s, you decided to leave your marriage and start over as a single mom. Tell me a little bit about how that decision has changed your life and brought you to this point today where you're helping other people navigate divorce.
Well, I married when I was young, certainly for the time. I was I was 24 when I got married.
Mm-hmm.
And I had two great kids, started a business which was successful, and just felt my marriage was very hollow, and it was not, there was just something that was really off. And it took a lot of courage to make that decision. And when I went through it, it was pretty high conflict. It took a long time, and there were not a lot of resources out there other than, sort of hiring an attorney and sort of muddling my way through it. After that, a few years after I got divorced, I was lucky enough to find someone else and got remarried and blended a family of 6. So I raised 6 kids, and once they were really out of the nest, I realized how much my divorce had impacted me and how much I thought about it sort of in the back of my mind, and it influenced a lot of things in my life. I decided to really dig into that. And once I did, I realized that I felt there was a lot wrong with the divorce process and wanted to figure out how to make a change, and researched life coaching, which I'm certified in, and then found Divorce Coaches Academy, where I trained as a certified alternative dispute resolution divorce coach.
So before you left, you mentioned that you had a business that was successful. What were you doing before? Have you always been an entrepreneur or had that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, or were you working for a company? But it sounds like you had your own money coming in before you decided to divorce. Did that have an impact on your ability to make this decision?
That's a great question. I did. I was a graphic designer by training, and I had moved a few times with my ex-husband for his job, and in doing so left a job that I really loved as a graphic designer, which compelled me to start a baby blanket company called Little Moon Jumper, which is still in existence, which I've had for nearly 30 years. Wow. And that was my own baby. I still have it, and it gave me some confidence to go out and be on my own, knowing I had that.
So your approach is very emotionally attuned, which I think is very helpful for people going through this. But what does that mean in practice for somebody that's going through a divorce?
Well, there are a lot of factors that play into divorce. It depends sort of wherever you are on the spectrum, if you're trying to figure out if that's the right course for you, if you're in the middle of it, or if post-divorce, there are so many emotions that need to be processed. And one of the issues that really comes up that divorce coaches can help with is managing your emotions in the process. And I'm really a conflict resolution specialist because divorce is full of conflict. Even the kindest divorces, conflicts come up, parenting plans and financial issues, and being able to have emotional intelligence and approach these conflicts as problems to be solved and opportunities to come up with a solution is let's see, it's the best way to keep things civil, and there's skills that you can be taught.
Do you work with one person or do you work with couples?
One person.
Yeah.
One person. So typically, I mean, I prefer to work in mediation. The goal is to try to change there's a big shift to try to change divorce processes from litigation into mediation. And in mediation, a mediator needs to be a neutral party. So they are not there for one individual. A divorce coach really can help someone with emotional management, as I mentioned, as well as a lot of other skills for negotiating and strategizing.
That's interesting. And that makes sense because I feel like at this point, when you come in, And also, you've mentioned your life coaching skills, where I think a lot of people don't realize how much one person can change the dynamic in any conversation or relationship without having to make somebody else change or having to try to force your will on somebody. So I think that's interesting because a lot of times I talk to people who are in, high conflict situations, whether it's at work or at home, and they want the other person to just change and just realize all the mistakes they're making, everything bad. And deep down that you can't. It's impossible.
That's a great point. And that is something a lot of people run up against in a few ways. One is typically people in the past have thought the first thing I need to do when I get a divorce is hire an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Tough attorney, depending on, I need somebody who's a bulldog, I need someone who's going to stand up for me. And that is that mentality to go and win.
Mm-hmm.
And and a lot of times people are expecting to have this emotional justification moment in the court system. It doesn't exist. There's no opportunity to go share your story and say, hey, he's a bad guy. She did this, she did that. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. If one person can learn how to communicate effectively and strategize on how to have these conversations and stay in control, then the whole dynamic can shift.
Yeah, I think that can be so helpful. And I think it's important for people to consider where they might need support and coaching, just like any other sport, any other skill that they're trying to learn that maybe they feel like they're, confused about or too invested in it to really see clearly. I think that's where a coach can really help, even if it's just asking questions differently. And you use different concepts and tools in your practice. Can you talk a little bit about those types of approaches and tools that you use with your clients?
Sure. Depending on sort of where we are in the process, and I'm also trained as a pre-mediation divorce coach, which is preparing people specifically for the mediation process. Um, one of the most important things in negotiating in a divorce is really understanding what your interests are
Hmm.
instead of your position. People get very stuck on, hey, I need to stay in my house. Well, that might not make financial sense, in uncovering the reasons why I really want my kids to stay in the same school district.
Yeah.
That's the difference. That's the interest versus getting really stuck on a position. And so we work on tools. We assess values, value threats, what the concept of what fair is, the
Hmm.
concept of, you know, if you have children, keeping them at the center of the focus of everything. We work on reality testing. What do you want your divorce to look like? What do you want your graduation for your kids to look like?
Mm.
And to look in the bleachers for your parents together, or do you want to be on opposite sides of the stadium? So what's your vision for how this plays out? And then you're based on your values, like make sure that the decisions you make are aligned with what is the most important to you.
I think that's important. A lot of people are thinking about right now, but asking a question about how you want to feel at an event 12 years from now or something like that is probably something they haven't really gotten to or thought of. And it might change their perspective and how they approach things today. So I think that's important. I think that's really helpful. And I've seen that recently divorce rates, and I'm not sure, I think I heard this on the radio, that um, they've been going up, especially in June. And I don't know if that's a seasonal thing, if that's something that's happened post-pandemic or what's going on. But have you seen any changes as far as the people you're talking to and what you're hearing when it comes to divorce, or if people are feeling like they've been stuck for a number of years and feel like now they can maybe do something? I'm not sure. Are you noticing any trends there, or is this just something that I might have heard?
I don't know that I'm noticing any
Yeah.
trends. I think it's a huge decision. Apparently,
Yeah.
second only in stress level to losing a child.
Hmm.
So it is a huge decision, and I think during the pandemic things definitely changed
Yeah.
because people were really stuck.
Hmm.
There were not a lot of options. So maybe there has been some realizations that there are opportunities for people to get out of
Yeah.
unhappy relationships. But it's a huge decision, no doubt. It's one of the biggest ones you can make.
I've definitely seen that where some people are actually living with their ex and staying in the same spot for financial reasons. Is that an area where you could potentially help somebody who might be living with somebody that they are separated from or currently divorced from? Because I can't imagine how that goes.
Yeah, I mean personally, I can't imagine
Yeah.
having that situation. There are scenarios when people do nesting, which is
Yeah.
which is where if they have children, the children stay in place in a home and the parents are the ones that come and go. So the children have the security of
Mm.
staying in their own home. I I don't know. I haven't worked with anyone who's
Yeah.
been in that case. I think that would
Yeah.
be difficult.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something I've seen or I've talked to a few people where it's really, yeah, the home is really driving a lot of the big financial piece of it because they can't buy the other person out. They don't want to sell it. They don't know where they would go. And so a lot of um the issues do tend to, come back to money in certain ways. Obviously, there's other things that are factors in divorce, but that big financial piece of it is really important, I think, to look at with somebody or talk to, just to really understand what's going on there and how to make things work in the best possible way with all of these competing and conflicting goals. I'm curious, what are some of your divorce coaching seems like it's a relatively new business. I don't know if I've heard of it until fairly recently. Life coaching, other types of coaches, therapists for marriage and stuff. But I think like your line of work is relatively new. Tell me, what are some of the misconceptions that you see when you introduce yourself to people and tell them what you do?
Well, I think people always sort of, what? I've never heard of that. That's usually the first thing that people say. And and I say, what I tell them is that it's certainly a new field, and really we are here to, you know, you're you find if you're looking for a divorce coach, someone who's certified, who's
Hmm.
trained, and not just has been divorced. That's not a
Hmm.
qualification for being a life coach,
Yeah.
but someone who really has a framework for how to help people through all this. And wait, can you repeat your question again? Because I forgot exactly what you asked
Oh,
me.
just the misconceptions and what people, what they might think you do.
I think they think that I give them advice, which
Mm.
I don't. I'm not here. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a therapist.
Hmm.
I'm really here to help them move forward through a process that's really difficult. I
Hmm.
help them, knowledge is power. So help them understand the processes, what there are numerous ways to get divorced. So people don't know that. They don't ever think about putting together a divorce budget. How much do you want to spend on your divorce?
Hmm.
What's really important to you? What are the, how do I put a proposal together? How do I negotiate with someone? How do I manage um, my emotions around someone who I've clearly can't be married to now. So all these emotions are going to keep coming up. That's not all of a sudden going to get better when you're getting divorced.
Yeah.
So I really help them learn how to get through this difficult time and ask a lot of questions because really people know what they want. They just need the time to consider what that is
Yeah.
and base their decisions on what's the most important to them.
I think, do people think that you must not be married?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Um, because
You
you're
know,
happily married, you're married right now, right? And yeah, I think
I'm
that,
happily married, and yeah, I think people probably do think that I'm divorced, and never got remarried. Yeah, probably.
oh, it's interesting because I think that's one of the things I love about entrepreneurship and business and how things change. There's going to be a lot more jobs that are not ones that we've commonly heard of, or maybe we didn't go to school or, as a little girl dream about being what we end up doing. I think that that's going to become more and more normal because a lot of problems are really solved and a lot of innovation comes from seeing where there's gaps, where there's
Sure.
problems
Yeah.
that don't have a current solution or that things are just harder than they need to be. And so I think that that's something that we're going to continue to see more of. Even as, technology and certain things take over, I do feel like that human piece of it, that managing your emotions, that talking to somebody who understands you, that's helping you kind of see a more clarity around what you're doing. Those jobs are going to become more and more important, I think, in this economy. So I do think that it's something to, if you feel like there is something that's happened in your life that is um, that you could maybe build from or help more people from, I think it's just a really interesting thing not to ignore it because you don't know how to start. Because I think you just kind of back into it with, like you did with the life coaching. We've seen other coaches. How do they do it? What do they get? Oh, they get certified. Okay. And just continue to be curious because I think a lot of us, it depends on who it is that you feel compelled to help. But there's certainly things out there that can make, I think, very, lucrative careers. Would you mind talking about the business side of it for you and how that's kind of changed and evolved and how you work with clients specifically and, kind of the packages or how would somebody work with you if they were interested?
Sure, I'm happy to address that. I also just wanted to bring up something you said, which I loved, which was how important the human approach is and how important it is. I mean, AI is never going to be able to help someone through all this in a divorce.
Yeah.
And the compassion, the empathy, and learning these skills, yeah, they're incredibly important in divorce, but they're also so beneficial in all aspects of your life.
Mhm.
Learning how to sort of control yourself and not let your amygdala take over a conversation and lose it. You can't make a rational decision when you're not thinking soundly.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you saying that about the human touch and
Mhm.
bringing experience and wanting to help people solve problems that you've recognized that you could. I mean, it's been an incredible experience for me to help people and see them thrive through something where I've just floundered and had no idea. So thank you for bringing that up. And in terms of working with clients, I work with clients. I have a number of different packages,
Mhm.
and summer, and I also offer free consult calls so people can see if we're a good fit. So that's always, sort of step number one. And then if they're trying to figure things out, I offer packages of 3 and 6,
Mhm.
and also one that's very much focused on pre-mediation, which is a package of 8 sessions with um, very specific goals in mind and trying to get things done in a certain time frame.
So pre-mediation, I've talked to some people, and I know that from my perspective, I haven't talked to too many people where mediation worked very well. And it might be just because I don't think people understand when it's the right fit, when it's not. And you said that divorce is kind of moving that way direction versus litigation. So what should some people think about in that pre-mediation phase so that they actually use it for what it's, meant for and take advantage of that process? Because I feel like some people maybe don't understand what that process is and kind of feel like they're wasting money and time. And then they end up just hiring a lawyer eventually anyway, because they kind of didn't go through that process right. Can you explain that a little bit more to me?
Sure. So the best way to describe it is that you want to be as informed as possible. One of the women that trained me uses the analogy of you aren't going to remodel your kitchen without plans, and
Hmm.
you aren't going to hire an electrician to put your tiles in. So
Hmm.
you want a team that is very specific. You want experts in what they're doing. And in mediation, you're preparing to negotiate.
Hmm.
And negotiation is basically giving up something you want for something you want more. So, in order to do that, you need to determine what is important to you. You need to determine what's most important to you. And in mediation, you have the opportunity to agree to what works for both you, your partner, and your children. If you go to court and you go to litigation, there's state mandates.
Hmm.
There's one that's really, they're not interested in you. They're not interested in your family. You might get a family judge who has had a fight with his kid that morning and shows up and they don't care. So in mediation, you have an opportunity to really be the CEO of your own divorce. And that's really the goal of mediation. You do want to have often a consulting attorney. You might need a CDFA. You might need a realtor to help you sell your house. So you put together a team of professionals that are experts in what they do to help you get through this with the least amount of chaos and save money. It sounds counterintuitive often to have a team,
Hmm.
but if you're strategically asking them the right questions,
Yeah.
you're not just hiring them to solve every problem that you have.
Yeah, because I feel like with mediation, like the goal isn't to win, it's to agree, right, on an outcome. And so if you feel like I'm never going to agree with this person, mediation is going to be difficult unless you have somebody telling you this is what we need to do. This is some of the things that we should think about ahead of time. Instead of going into it just thinking, oh, they'll just agree with me and know that I'm right.
Which is rarely going to happen, right?
Rarely gonna happen. Yeah, no, and I think it's important what you said about the court system and how sometimes they might not care or they might have a bias or whatever's going on. Like
They
it is
don't
not,
care. It's not their job to care,
it's not their
and
job to care.
it's their job to execute the law.
Mhm.
And that's really where family courts can really fail
Yeah.
people, and their decision. You're giving up your decision making process, and
Hmm.
that's a big thing to do. These are decisions in a divorce that you live with for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Now, I think that's interesting, and I think it is something that would definitely be worthwhile. You mentioned having a free consultation to if you really do need that kind of clarity and understanding, because some people this might be the first time they've ever even encountered this system and know
Of
what to do.
course. I mean, no one knows what they're doing unless they've been divorced before, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not something that anyone knows how to do. So, I like to kind of think myself as a divorce doula, right?
Yeah.
I've been through it. I can answer a lot of questions around it. If I don't know the answer, I'm happy to point you in the direction of an expert that does, and put together a team so that you can successfully get through something with and something that you want to live with, something that makes sure your children that you are, creating a nurturing environment in spite of the fact that you are living in two different homes,
Hmm.
and what that looks like and what those terms are. And maybe something that's really important to you isn't as important to your soon to be ex.
Yeah.
And there's a trade-off there.
Hmm. No, I think that's important, kind of figuring out what your priorities are, knowing that you might have to make some concessions. But yeah, I think that that is important to know instead of going in with that kind of really hoping for everything to work out your way, which just
Well,
may not be
no,
the case.
it's it's not going to ever go. You're
Yeah.
not going to get everything you want,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean, like the Rolling Stone song. But you can, if you learn how to negotiate properly, and you learn some tactical
Mhm.
strategic skills, and how to, again, manage your emotions and keep your cool, and you know what you're working towards, you can effectively negotiate for yourself.
Do you have any tools or any times where you've talked to somebody who really has never managed the finances at all and feel like that is one of the things that might be keeping them in a situation that's no longer good for them?
Yes, and I think, I would say typically that's women in
Hmm.
general, that women have had either little input or limited access, not because of any wrongdoing, but just not, that hasn't been sort of the role in their family,
Hmm.
and are scared of that. And sometimes it's as simple as letting them, helping them understand that child support and spousal support are actually, state formulas.
Hmm.
So they're, again, knowledge, putting people at ease. Like, you're going to
Yeah.
get this, and then you can put them in touch with, someone like you who does,
Hmm.
financial planning, who really can help them understand what their next steps would look like after divorce settlement.
And a lot of times with the financial end of it, I have seen, where people, and I know that this is something that you've worked with and are sort of like with coercive control and trauma, that maybe for no fault of their own, they've been kind of kept outside of the financial picture, or they've been, deceived, and so I feel like that is something that I think some courts, some states are starting to recognize, but it is something that, I think causes a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of different feelings when it comes up. But as you said, it is important to have those kind of resources to know that this is how it is looked at. These are state formulas, like you mentioned, and things like that, because some people may really just not understand or know, feel like maybe there's something else that's hiding, but they would never know how to figure that out. And so those are some times where it's just really sad situations. I love working with couples because I feel like when we get the whole financial picture kind of out there, I think it does resolve some conflicts in a marriage, talking about the money together, even if one person is taking the lead on the income earning or the spending or the budgeting. I think it's so helpful when there is a clear picture,
Right.
because that can be a cause for a lot of conflict and communication issues that can. I know they say money is one of the leading causes of divorce. I'm not sure if it really is. I think a lot of times it's communication and conflict and other things that kind of money takes the blame for. But I haven't had anybody really say, yeah, I left my husband because he lost his job, or I left my wife because she didn't make enough money. Like, it's usually something else. So how do you help people with it when it comes to communication, when you're dealing with people that, they're kind of in a situation that's really bringing out the worst in maybe how they're feeling or what they want to say, or maybe there's anger or, fear. How do you help people kind of navigate those conversations and diffuse some of that tension when they're trying to just get through this
Well, that's a
process?
big that's a big issue, and it doesn't it often is around finances, because that is, a fear. But
Mhm.
there's, you asked me before about assessments. There's one specifically called the SCARF assessment by David Rock, which is, SCARF stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness.
Okay.
And those are all threats to we all feel in different ways. In divorce, usually you feel all of them. And scarcity, status a lot of times is how you're feeling within your marriage. It can be your
Mhm.
status within your marriage. Something's changed, or to your point, say a woman's worked at home and she
Mhm.
has left a job and she's not earning as what
Mhm.
she did before. She feels that he has more status than her in that
Mhm.
relationship. How does that play out? That creates a power dynamic.
Mhm.
Your certainty, where am I going to live next year? I'm going to be in my house. So we assess all that. My autonomy. I don't feel like I have a voice in this situation. I don't make the money. How am I gonna survive after this divorce?
Yeah.
Relatedness. Well, what's going to happen, if our friendships change? Someone decides they're going to be his friend and not my friend. How does that? These are all
Yeah.
fears. And fairness, which is in divorce, kind of a four-letter word. It's
Yeah.
not, there's, it's degrees of fairness or
Mhm.
my interpretation of fairness. So as a divorce coach, we work on what all those things mean. And then we work on, assessing what your triggers are. If you're going to have that really difficult conversation, you know this person better than anybody on the planet. They know how to push your buttons.
Mhm. Yeah.
So what are those hot buttons? And we can work on how to get through that tough conversation.
Yeah.
You say something and I get angry right away, I'm not going to I'm that's done. That's not going to work. But if I can say, "Okay, you know what? I hear this is really important to you. Can you
Mhm.
help me understand why you think X? Why you think that you should keep the house
Mhm.
and I should go live in an apartment." Whatever the question
Mhm.
is, there's a way to keep it civil and nonviolent communication skills so
Mhm.
that you can at least have a conversation about it.
Yeah. I think those skills, they're so important. I try to teach with my son and daughter who are just learning that they can push each other's buttons like really well. Like, like nobody can set my son up
And
like
always will.
his little sister. And it's just interesting because, like, it's like, okay, like how you respond is going to have an impact on whether this happens again or not. It's just funny because you're right. This is somebody that you've lived with, that you've loved and known for a long time. Um, but if you're able to diffuse things and come back to, yeah, okay, I heard you.
I heard you. I
I
hear
get that.
hear it's really important to you instead of getting really angry.
Yeah.
We work on ear statement, which is empathetic, attentive, and I'm not going to remember they are right now, but
Yeah.
different forms of communication. Oh,
Mhm.
and respectful. So I'm going to get this text message. I could read it. I could read into it. It could make me angry or crazy. And you know what? I can just let it sit on my desk. I can really think about it. I can think about how to thoughtfully respond to not escalate the
Mhm.
situation. And those are kind of, the skills that we work on.
Yeah. And those skills are so, like you mentioned before, they're universal skills. These can help you in other areas of your life as well. As you're going through this, I think those are ones that you could take with you and remember as
Absolutely.
you're navigating, your new situation, your new social life, all of those things that come up. And I think that can be really, really helpful. You work with a lot of women. How do you feel like any gender dynamics, aside from potentially being the lower earning spouse in some relationships or maybe having less, financial confidence, have you seen any other ways that like the gender dynamics show up in your work, or do you work with men as well?
I work with men as well. I would say the majority of my clients are women. Uh, and I don't know if that's just because I'm a woman and they're, sort of they relate to me just easier thinking that they can speak to me in a different way. I do think that there's certainly some coercive control issues that come up with women, that's not a finance thing. And that often manifests itself in fear of
Mhm.
really like how do I different aspects of fear, worried about, how their kids are going to be sort of could be used as tools in this divorce situation. That's a very, very difficult one that I see often. And a lot of it comes around the perception of what power is, and women not feeling that that their voice is heard,
Mhm.
and how to effectively communicate their position without being, for lack of a better word, bullied.
Yeah. No,
So
I
that's
think
a lot.
that's a tricky, and that's tough. And I think, yeah, especially when there's children involved, when there's fear, when there could be potential, real abuse. Like I think those situations, having somebody that you can speak to or relate to is so important. And I don't know, I mean, maybe this is another area where there could be potential career opportunities for men going into this space, because I do feel like there's a lot of need for support for people who are going through divorce, men and women, to kind of talk with somebody and learn some of those skills that maybe we haven't all learned necessarily or have at, in our toolbox to use. So super important work that you're doing. Can you share any stories, anonymously, of course, about any times that a transformation with a client has really stuck with you?
Sure, that's a great question. Recently, I had a client who was very stuck, and it was actually in his position, and really felt that there was this tension that was unresolved for years
Hmm.
with the ex-wife, and they couldn't communicate, and they knew that they wanted to get divorced. And it was just a simple question of asking him, like, well, what would it look like if you thanked her and you appreciated what she has done, and you just lay down the sword and stop having this expectation
Hmm.
that you're already looking to change things. But we talked about, what do you want that to look like
Hmm.
afterwards? And it stopped him in his tracks because he'd gotten so dug in deep in this being his enemy in a way.
Yeah.
And because he had mentioned numerous times, she's a great mom and she's all these great things. Like, well, what if you recognize that? And that doesn't go away. What if
Hmm.
what if you just lay down the sword?
Yeah.
And it was I couldn't believe I received an email from later that evening, and he said I had this great talk with her, and we related in a way, and we put down my armor and
Hmm.
had a great talk with my kids. So that's one that was really
Yeah.
valuable for me.
Wow. That's super
And that's a simple
powerful.
question. And I think, a lot of what we try to do as divorce coaches is very actively listen to what someone is saying and
Hmm.
what they're saying that they're not saying.
Yeah.
What's really deep in there. And the conflict for him is he was feeling no matter what he said, he wasn't heard.
Hmm.
So it became so combative. And just like, what if you stop competing? What if you just
Yeah.
stop? So
Right. Yeah, no, and naturally, the first th thought wouldn't be to acknowledge her and hear her when she's not listening to you. It's okay, well, it's never going to change. So I think that that is just such a different perspective and a different outlook to share with somebody. And I think that's why it could be the transformation can happen so quickly, and it doesn't take years. It could take one call or something that could really change, the way the course of a relationship goes. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's really, I think that's an interesting way to look at it. And you're right. I think a lot of times our human brains want to be right. They don't want to be happy. It's not
yeah, you did.
programmed that way.
And
It
again,
wants to be
it's
right
that
and to win.
position.
And so,
Right.
but what if happiness or maybe peace is a better choice? That's going to take some work. You're going to have to do some
It's a lot of
gymnastics with
work,
your
but I think
mind.
especially in divorce and someone
Hmm.
who's been divorced, and I see my ex and our daughter
Hmm.
graduated recently from business school and we were all together. And your kids are watching you.
Yeah.
Your kids, if you have children and they're in this relationship, they are seeing how you're handling something that's really
Mhm.
difficult. And if you have the ability to put them, make them the North Star of this
Hmm.
process, then every decision you make, every comment that you make, if
Hmm.
you can bring that back to if my kid were going to read this, like if some, I'm I want to do this the right way for my children so that when they go out in the world, they're okay with
Hmm.
us being divorced. They know that we love them. They know that we did X, Y, and Z to make sure that they felt secure.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that shift away from, oh, this person's the enemy and I got to win this, and focusing on what's really important can drive a whole different set of decisions.
Yeah. So, what are some signs if somebody's listening and they feel like they might be ready, like to begin coaching or are in the right space to benefit from your support? Where do you think that person, what are some signs that they would be in that space?
I think ideally it's great to get someone who's really just trying to figure it out, right? Because a lot of times before you hire an attorney, because that's everyone thinks that's the first thing you need to do, like what kind of divorce do you want? If you've been married for 2 years and you don't have a lot of assets and kids, you can get divorced online. There people don't know that there are all these different processes.
Mhm.
How much money do you want to spend on your divorce? What do you want it to look like? So a real conversation at the beginning is great. If someone is also very, questioning their ability to get through a situation. They feel overwhelmed. They don't know. Therapy is great, and that's a wonderful complement to what I do. It's very different. A lot of therapy is looking backwards, but they're now ready to take that next step and get through it.
Mhm.
And what do I need? And who do I need on my team? Again, the kitchen remodeling. What
Yeah.
experts do I need? And
Yeah.
what kind of attorney do I want? What questions do I ask an
Mhm.
attorney? How do I pick a mediator? These are all things we talk about.
Yeah. No, those are very helpful. And I think there's a lot of times where people start with I need to go find this, pitbull of an
Yeah.
attorney, or I need to do this. And they might not really know what they should be doing or what to expect in that process. So I do think that,
And they can
um,
create more conflict by doing
yeah,
that. So even
yeah.
if we have the conversation like, hey, they've made up their mind, but how do I tell my spouse?
Hmm.
Right? That's another thing we work on. How do you set the tone? How do you create this to be the best scenario it can be,
Yeah.
given that it's incredibly difficult and stressful?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was really interesting to learn more about what you do and how you got into this work, and just about this space in general. I think it is a huge, obviously, it's a huge financial decision, has a big financial impact on people, but it is something that, is very common, and a lot of people go through it, but a lot of people go through it with no support, no help, no idea, and so to know that there's resources out there, I think are very, very helpful. How can people find you if they want to get on, your newsletter or learn more about you?
I have a website called Step Up with Lyerly, and that is a little play on me being the stepmother of children, as well as stepping up into being your best self through this process. So Step Up with Lyerly is my website. My Instagram is step up underscore with Lyerly. And I do have a blog on my website with different aspects of nonviolent communication, different tools, different aspects of the divorce process.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. We'll include that all in the show notes. And if you're looking, yeah, to reach out, definitely look at her website, follow her online, or if you're looking for more of those nonviolent communication techniques, this doesn't necessarily just apply to people who are going through divorce. This
Absolutely.
can be really helpful for a lot of people if you're having situations at work or in any other area of your life where you want to be able to communicate better, negotiate, get things done. I think that can all be very, very helpful. So thank you so much, Lyerly, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. And yes, I do. I have a lot of those tools in my blogs. A
Yeah.
lot of your statements, BIF, emotional management, understanding conflict styles. That
Mhm.
that's all listed there.
Yeah, I think the more we learn about this, the more resources you have, I think it'll just put us all in a better position to recognize things in ourselves, recognize, how we could communicate better. And I think a lot of things can change, even if no one else is out there doing the work. If you are doing the work, a lot of times things can go a lot smoother. So definitely check that out. And also, if you're looking for more resources on, your personal finance or your mindset and development, please head over to mistylynch.com. You can grab a copy of my book or find other episodes of the podcast where I talk with other entrepreneurs who are out there in their businesses helping other people in the world with problems that they felt needed to be solved just a little bit better. So thank you so much for joining, and we'll talk again next week. Don't forget to share with friends and family, and together let's demystify the world of money. Knowledge is the key to financial empowerment.